I'd like to welcome to the stage next, Wunderman and Shell, David Lloyd. David.
Hello everyone. I'd like to start really just by giving a little bit of introduction to us and our relationship with Shell. Wunderman, we're sort of data and creative agency, and one of the things that we sort of passionate and live by is that we are creatively driven and data inspired. And this is an attitude and way of working that underpins everything that we do. And we think that the Shell Pump Challenge is the perfect example of this in practice. Perfect synergy of sort of creative and data, both in terms of the data and creative output, but also how creative thinking was at the heart of the data analysis itself. So our UK client gave us a challenge last year, quite a simple one. Find new ways to incentivize drivers to fill up with greater volumes of fuel on the forecourt. Pretty obvious, Shell want to sell more fuel, not a surprise. But not necessarily the start that's really going to get us thinking creatively. So there's a couple of challenges that we had with this. Is that, the first one, we've got to recognize that filling up is boring. We can't ignore this. It's not an exciting thing that people necessarily enjoy that much. And research told us that pretty much, most people see it as a necessary thing they have to do. The best we can really do is make that quick and painless for them and kind of relieve any anxiety that it's going to be drawn out. The other challenge that we face is that the loyalty market is in overload. It's really competitive. You're fighting for the wallet space in terms of all the loyalty cards. Consumers over the years have become very desensitized to loyalty points and all the emails that go with them. And also, with this particular program, there are restrictions in terms of how we could incentivize customers. Ultimately, the bonus point element of the program was pretty much the only tool that we had to play with. So I guess bearing this in mind, one of the things that we wanted to do to help us think a bit more creatively was reframe this challenge. So how do we overcome these challenges? How do we overcome the mundane chore of filling up to create that true cut-through and behavior change? So one of the ways that we focus our creative data thinking is we're very lucky at Wunderman to have a diverse range of skills. So even if it's a data challenge, we don't just use analysts. We bring in a full range of different skill sets. So we use creative people, analysts, strategists, the account managers, and actually importantly in this specific occasion, the client themselves we include in this process. We also use a range of frameworks that help synthesize creative, strategic, and data viewpoints, working from the consumer insights through to those ideas that are going to help enhance the customer experience, ensuring that there's a business impact measured throughout. So where do we start in terms of uncovering an insight for this challenge? Well, the data we've got just for the UK is 43 million loyalty transactions a year. So we can look at this data in so many ways. We can look at the customer types, whether they're multi-car households, whether they're commuters or weekend fillers. We can look at how often they fill up, how much they fill up. We can think about, do they buy in store? What do they buy in store? When do they turn up? Do they visit different sites or just one? Do they redeem rewards? Do they engage with a loyalty program? Ultimately, there's a huge sea of data and a lot of questions we can fire at it, especially when you start overlaying these dimensions. So the way we approach this is, as a team, we've obviously got to brainstorm and create these hypotheses, and then design the analysis to test and validate those hypotheses. So on this occasion, here's a couple of examples of going through this process and some of the insights we found. So really trying to find that human behavior that we all relate to. So one thing we looked at were in-store transactions, and when people tended to transact. And unsurprisingly, we found that in terms of car wash, Sunday was the most prevalent day at midday, probably not a surprise. And guess what? In terms of coffee purchase, there was a peak on Wednesday. Obviously, people not quite close enough to the weekend and need to fight through it. So you go through this cycle various times, obviously uncovering some of these good insights, but I guess on this occasion, we hit a bit of a dead end. Although these are good, they're not necessarily tackling that core challenge of the actual fill behavior at the forecourt. So I guess we kind of ran out of ideas a little bit. So I guess as a bunch of English people, what do you do when you run out of ideas?
Go to the pub.
Bang on.
There you go.
We went to the pub, of course.
I never saw the presentation, I swear.
I felt that was a good call, though. Well done.
Good, all right.
And obviously, a bit of beer helps the creative data juices flowing. Our client was in the pub with us, and he told us a story about when he was a kid and his dad used to fill up. And he used to, he'd used to fill up in the forecourt, but he wouldn't fill up the whole tank. He would aim for a particular price point, gently tapping until he got the exact amount. And we all thought, yeah, you know what, I've done that before. We could all kind of relate to it, so immediately we thought we had the idea. So we immediately jumped onto the data and thought we'd try and validate this. And guess what? 30% of customers, consciously or subconsciously, filled their tank to a round price point. So actually what you found is that in most occasions they actually missed it. So we found that people set themselves this little challenge because it's a boring task and they've got to make a bit of fun out of it. But actually, it's very common and most people actually fail in doing it. So this insight inspired our idea, which was the Shell Fuel Pump Challenge, where we applauded and rewarded customers for achieving the exact price point when they filled up. This happened in real life, so obviously if you're in part of the loyalty program and you filled up to the exact price point, you got rewarded for doing so. But we also created an app to help test people's reactions times, so they could actually practice when they're not filling up itself.
This is simulated pumping?
It's just...
Okay.
He said that, not me. Anyway. So how did it work? So basically the way it worked is there were particular thresholds and you'd get bonus points if you hit the exact amount of particular thresholds. So if you missed one, you could then fill up to the next one to get the bonus points. And this obviously had a great effect. This was the most successful Shell campaign ever run. We saw fantastic results, and I think there's a video that's going to take you through the story. Cool, thank you. Are there any questions?
Jury, do you have any questions?
So you shared some metrics around the success of the program in terms of engagement, but what about actually driving more fill-ups? Because I kind of would expect that this might encourage folks to fill up their tank less than they otherwise would.
Yeah, so we didn't give the exact sort of monetary gains, but it was basically we kept a control cell in terms of the fill behavior, and we got 17% uplift in fill behavior as a result of this. And it was sustained over a period as well.
Another question?
What was it that made this campaign successful? Was it that many people were, when they were having, for example, 20.01 as a number, that they would increase and go to 30, or was it just that more people would come to the tank?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a combination. So we found examples that people were more commonly aiming for the price point than they were. So obviously it's 37% historically, but we did find actually more people as a result were trying to do that. We just found it was basically a lift across most metrics in terms of frequency, fill amount as well.
Yeah, thanks.
What were the tangential results? So in-store sales, did you see an increase in basket size in store as well in the forecourt shops? Did you measure it?
Yeah, I mean, I think from memory, I don't think there was. I think because we drove more people in, we got more convenience retail sales, but I don't necessarily think, I don't think there was a huge amount of increase. Again, that wasn't the immediate focus of the campaign, but obviously because we got more people in more often, it helped.
So you didn't track, have you
We
tracked?
did track it, we just didn't see a proportional uplift. We saw an uplift as a result of higher
Gotcha.
frequency.
I would think that you'd make more money not on the dollar amounts per transaction, but potentially drawing people in from competitors. Did you notice a share of market shift for this, where people said, I could go to Shell and have this fun game as opposed to going to some other?
Yeah, I mean, measuring share of wallet is always a bit of a challenge because you've got to use sort of third-party data for that. I think we didn't do that on this occasion, but I guess whenever we've measured that in the past, we've noticed that if we can increase frequency, the share of wallet improves as well. So I think, without sort of actually having the exact evidence, I think it's a fair assumption that we did increase that.
Great, thank you. Let's give a round of applause.